This is a recording of a webinar previously aired on the 17th of February 2022 and is brought to you by the North East LEP and Tees Valley Combined Authority. The topic of this webinar is Looking Beyond Europe, Trade Agreement Opportunities. This session was previously presented by Ben Bradford. This session covered what is a trade agreement, what is the GSP, what does all of this mean for your business, some practical examples for importing and exporting, and upcoming opportunities. So over to you, Ben.
Thank you very much, Tracy, and good morning, everyone. Like Tracy mentioned, today we're really taking a step back from the UK-EU conversation and having a look beyond Europe at the opportunities that are available in the wider world, and hopefully help you see some possible alternatives for your business. Because a lot has been said about the UK-EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement by businesses, the media and the government. Even as recently as the other week, the UK government released a paper titled The Benefits of Brexit to commemorate the 2-year anniversary since the UK left the EU. And last week in the cabinet reshuffle, we saw Rees-Mogg appointed with the title of the Brexit Opportunities Minister. In its simplest form, the UK leaving the EU and the Trade and Cooperation Agreement is the same as any other trade agreement. Trading with the EU is now on a level playing field with the other UK trade agreements, and, as we will get onto later, gives us the opportunity to sign our own trade agreements and decide where we want to focus our attention. Firstly though, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's just ask the question: what is a free trade agreement? Well, an FTA sets out the rules that covers trade between either two, so a bilateral agreement, or more, multilateral agreement, countries. Regardless of the trade agreement and how many countries are involved, they always have the same underarching aim: improve trade between the participating countries by making it easier to conduct that trade. So the next question is, how do they go about trying to improve that flow of trade? Well, I think we're all aware, arguably, that the main point for most businesses as well is a reduction in customs duty. Now, this might be a partial reduction or could be a full reduction to 0%. It depends on your product and the FTA in question. However, that's not the only benefit of a free trade agreement. You may also find that an FTA includes sections on reducing barriers when trading in services, easement of customs formalities, recognition of professional qualifications, digital trade, intellectual property, and government procurement opportunities. And I think it's becoming increasingly common as well to see sections on trade and gender equality, and finally the environment. Now, these are just some areas an FTA may cover. These points aren't in every free trade agreement, and even if they are, not every trade agreement goes as far or is as liberalising. That's why it's important to consider each FTA separately. There isn't one rule which fits all. And the reason being is that FTAs need to be agreeable and fit the needs of each negotiating party. After all, they work in both directions, whether that's the import or an export of trade, or the simplification of accessing job opportunities. Each party will have their own aims, and subsequently both parties have to understand that a certain level of compromise may be necessary. So you might see similarities in trade agreements, but it is important that you treat them all independently. Just because it's in one agreement doesn't mean you can access exactly the same benefits in another. So please do just bear that in mind. Currently, broadly speaking, the UK has two different types of FTAs. We've got those which are continuations of trade agreements we had while part of the EU, and we have those which have been renegotiated or negotiated from scratch by an independent UK. Now, these continuation agreements have done a great job of ensuring smooth transition for those businesses who relied upon a trade agreement between the EU and another nation. It gives them the peace of mind of being able to continue trading on the same terms. On the other hand, you have the new UK trade agreements. Clearly, these are bespoke to the UK businesses, with negotiators only having to consider the UK's interest rather than those of the whole EU. However, as you can imagine, it is time consuming trying to renegotiate trade agreements or agree new agreements from scratch. Plus, we are not yet in a position where every country on the continuation list currently wants to renegotiate with the UK. So, as it stands, the continuation agreements have played a big part in ensuring smooth, uninterrupted trade. However, as time goes, we will see more and more bespoke UK trade agreements. Some will be totally new, while others will replace or build upon the continuation agreement which was already in place. I think finally on this FTA section, let's quickly have a look at the steps and stages involved in negotiating an FTA. This will come in handy later when we talk about some of our future opportunities, but for now, let's just have a look at the different steps. Firstly, obviously we've got the preparation, and that's always followed by your negotiations. Once they've taken place, we then have a finished and signed FTA. But importantly, as you can see, that after it's been signed, we've still got the process of going through decision making. We've still got to go through application and ratification stages before finally conclusion and entry into force. I just wanted to highlight this here to hopefully show that there are a lot of steps involved. If we think about potentially how long negotiations can take, or even how long it can take to ratify an agreement in Parliament, you can appreciate that this is not an overnight job. So even after we hear news that negotiations are finished and drafts have been agreed, doesn't necessarily mean that agreement is going to come into play overnight. Now, moving away slightly from FTAs, I just want to focus on something else which potentially can be of benefit to your business, and that is the generalized scheme of preference. Now, in comparison to the FTA agreements, these only benefit trade moving in one direction, and that is trade moving to the UK, so not exports from the UK to a GSP country. However, in a similar way to FTAs, trade from a GSP country allows the UK importer to rely upon a preferential tariff rate on the goods they import, potentially having a very real financial benefit for businesses. So currently, which countries fall under GSP? Because again, as a difference to FTAs, we cannot just go out and approach a country and negotiate for them to be listed as a GSP nation. The current framework of the GSP can be split into 3 sublists or subcategories, which are least developed countries framework. So this list includes countries that the UN classifies as least developed countries, and these countries have quota-free access and nil rate of import duty on all goods other than arms and ammunition. Then we've got the general framework, which is for countries that the World Bank classifies as either low income or low middle income countries. These countries are open to reduced rates on import VAT on particular goods. And then finally, the enhanced framework. So these are countries that are firstly classified by the World Bank as either low income or low middle income countries. Secondly, economically vulnerable. Now that's due to a lack of export diversification or a low level of integration with international trading systems. And thirdly, they must also implement 27 different conventions relating to human and labour rights, the environment and good governance. Now, in this instance, countries on this list have a nil rate of import duty on certain goods as well. Right, so if we move out of that, because we've defined what a free trade agreement is and we've defined the generalised scheme of preference, but the important question is, what does that actually do, or what does it actually mean for your business? Well, firstly, it gives businesses the opportunity to effectively redefine their supply chain or customer reach. Both FTAs and GSPs open the door to preferential tariff rates, and in turn, preferential tariff rate opens the door to reduced costs and overheads. Reduced overheads leading to potentially better margins and a more competitive product. But on top of the reduced tariff rates, and in particular with FTAs, you may find easy access for you and your products. So for example, could rely on mutual recognition of qualifications, and that can lead to easier market access for specialists, or potentially a reduction in customs formalities, which could result in reduced licenses and paperwork formalities for importers and exporters. What I want to do now is take what we've been talking about and put it in a practical example for you. So this is based on questions and issues we know that local businesses are having, particularly since the 1st of January 2021 and Brexit. So firstly, let's look at a supply chain issue. Our business here in Great Britain has a long-standing relationship with a business in Germany who supply them with cotton t-shirts. Prior to the 1st of Jan 21, the origin of these t-shirts wasn't a particularly big issue, as customs duty wasn't a concern. Now, however, if we use the UK trade tariff, you can see that the standard rate of duty for a cotton t-shirt is 12%. At this point, our GB importer asks his German supplier about the origin of the goods. Best case scenario, they are made in the EU and they can rely on the preferential tariff rate. Worst case scenario, and for this scenario in our example here, the goods are not made in the EU, and in this instance the goods aren't made in the EU, and as a result you need to pay the 12% duty rate. Now, as the GB importer, we're left with a couple of different options. Firstly, continue to import from the German supplier and pay the 12% duty on each import. Secondly, as the German supplier is merely a distributor, maybe we can see if we can locate the original manufacturer. Thirdly, look for an entirely new supplier which will allow you to benefit from a free trade agreement or maybe a GSP nation. Now, let's look at the business's possibilities if we were to take up the second and third option. To help us do this, let's give a couple of different scenarios. So let's say that you find out the German supplier obtains their product from a manufacturer in Bangladesh. And maybe from your own research, you find manufacturers who can provide the same quality product in both, let's say, Indonesia and Vietnam. So what our business now wants to consider is, if the rules of origin were going to be satisfied, would they be able to rely upon a preferential tariff rate if they imported the product directly from one of these nations? Well, let's take each one of them in turn. So firstly, Bangladesh, which is actually named on the GSP Least Developed Countries framework. A list of the countries which fall on any of the frameworks can be found here, and as you can see, Bangladesh there is listed under the Least Developed Countries framework. So what does this actually mean? Well, let's go back to the UK trade tariff. You can see that, as with every product, it lists not only the standard duty rate, but also what the preferential tariff rate is if it is applicable to the supplying nation. In this instance, the Least Developed Countries framework can rely on a 0% customs duty rate. It is worth noting here that if you just want to double check that the country in question is covered by a specific agreement, you can actually click on the blue underlined titles and a list such as this will pop up. And as you can see again, Bangladesh is listed with a 0% duty rate due to the GSP. Now, let's move away from Bangladesh and look at Indonesia. Now, Indonesia is listed on the GSP General Framework, so should be able to benefit from a reduced tariff rate. However, in this case, and again using the trade tariff, you can see that for our cotton t-shirts, the customs duty is going to be reduced, but importantly, only to 9.6%. It is not a full reduction. Finally, let's see the customs duty which is applicable to Vietnam. Now, as it currently stands, Vietnam is in a bit of a privileged position of being listed as a GSP country and falling under its very own free trade agreement. This won't last forever, but at the moment Vietnam does have the best of both, and that'll only be the case until the transition to the new trade agreement is fully in place. But like I said, at the moment, UK businesses could access whichever rate is lower. Now, Vietnam is in fact on the general framework with Indonesia, so we know that the duty rates there has been reduced to 9.6%. However, under the UK-Vietnam trade agreement, that allows for a customs duty rate of 6% for our cotton t-shirt. So trading with Vietnam under the FTA rather than the GSP will actually allow you to pay 3.6% less duty. So there we have it. Our business was being hit by 12% duty on its imports of their cotton t-shirt from Germany, simply because the goods didn't meet the rules of origin. In an effort to reconsider their supply chain, our business has located 3 alternative options who can provide him with either exactly the same product or very similar. Importantly, each of these 3 options meet the rules of origin requirements. So our business now has the option of importing from Bangladesh with 0% customs duty, importing from Indonesia with 9.6% customs duty, or import from Vietnam with as low as 6% customs duty. And obviously, there are additional factors which our business needs to consider. For example, you're going to have quality checks reassurances that the new supplier can meet quantity demands, you've got shipping costs, language barriers, etc. But in terms of purely customs duty, we've now got 3 viable alternatives which could result in our business paying less money. So after looking at the opportunities for importers, what about the flip side of the coin? Where can exporters go if they find themselves with EU trade problems following Brexit? What is out there beyond Europe for them to take advantage of? Let's look at another practical example then. Another business here in the Northeast has exported their goods to Europe, but since the 1st of Jan 2021, their European customers have been experiencing difficulties with the UK supply. That could be due to increased importing costs, increased logistic delays, and the new and more complex customs controls. And as a result, they've either reduced or cancelled their contracts with the supplier here in the Northeast and are moving to new suppliers from within the EU. And what that's done is that's leaving our local manufacturer needing to find new opportunities and potentially beyond Europe. So what opportunities are there and how do they go about accessing them? Well, firstly, finding the countries which have the biggest demand for your product, I would say, is a great place to start. Now, this is where the Department for International Trade, DIT, come in. They specialise in market access and assisting businesses in finding and setting up in new markets. And that can be done by helping them identify the right markets for their products or even setting up trade missions to introduce businesses to potential suppliers, buyers, agents, or other key supply chain executives in new countries. Now, after identifying a potentially new market for your product, it then comes down to what benefits does the manufacturer gain from trading with these countries, and why do they get those benefits? And that's where the FTAs are so important. With these agreements reducing or sometimes even completely erasing the duty paid on the goods, trading with these countries can be much more appealing and profitable. Let's take Japan, for instance. Exporting under the UK-Japan Free Trade Agreement, the CEPA, it reduces tariffs on all sorts of goods, from beef, reducing that from 38.5% to 9%, to sleeping bags, reducing from 3.8% to 0%. A free trade agreement can also, like we mentioned, reduce the restrictions on certain customs controls, limit the procedures that take up so much time when trying to get goods into foreign countries. Remember, again, if it's saving you time, then most likely it's also saving you money. So, as you can see, if our Northeast manufacturer is struggling to export to Europe, it's not the end of the world. If anything, these new FTAs offer a great opportunity to take their product to the rest of the world. It's about identifying the demand in those markets and looking at the FTAs to see how you can benefit. And it is also worth adding that these benefits, they're not only limited to goods. UK businesses that export services can also benefit from FTAs. I think it's important now for us just to have a look at some of the opportunities which are coming about over the next year or so. I think it's fair to say that the Department for International Trade and their trade negotiators are going to be busy as the UK looks to develop an improved and totally new trade relationships with every corner of the globe. Firstly, let's focus on North America. And arguably the best countries here to highlight would be Canada and Mexico. Currently, we have a rollover agreement, a continuation agreement from our time in the EU, which local businesses can obviously still benefit from. However, the UK has made it clear that they will be looking to renegotiate with both Canada and Mexico to agree upon an improved trade agreement which is bespoke to the UK's needs and requirements. Now, if I highlight America instead, because you may have heard that trying to get a trade agreement with America was one of the government's main aims after Brexit. Unfortunately, as it stands under the Biden administration, the idea of a UK-US trade agreement has been put on the back burner for now, but instead DIT are maybe shifting their focus to try and develop their relationships at state level, and there is the possibility there of making trade agreements with individual states such as California, for example. Now, moving away from North America, and let's dive into Australasia region instead, because as has been well publicised, we have seen strong developments in this region. Firstly, Australia became the first country with whom we negotiated a full trade agreement with from scratch since leaving the EU. Though the agreement has been signed, it is yet to come into force. Both countries are currently fulfilling their parliamentary requirements before we see the full benefits of that in practice. In terms of New Zealand, we're in a very similar position as to Australia. We've reached an agreement in principle and now at the point where that is being prepared for signature. I think this is a great place just to link back to that slide we had earlier, which explains the steps of agreeing a trade agreement. Remember, we have all these steps even after the agreement has been signed. So the best way I think maybe of describing the Australia and New Zealand agreements is that they are there, they are coming, and we will be able to take advantage of them. However, right now it is a bit of a waiting game. Moving back to our world map then, let's have a look at Asia. There are two countries in particular which I just want to highlight here, so let's start with India. The UK and India officially launched trade talks last month on the 13th of Jan, and hopefully there's great potential with this. It should be very exciting. India is forecasted to rise to the third largest economy by 2050. In terms of purely imports, India is currently ranked as the 8th highest in the world, but will rise again to third place by 2050. Now, with the rise of the middle class in India as well, it is definitely a growing, developing, exciting market which the UK is hoping businesses can access through a FTA. Back to our map of Asia, and let's look at South Korea. Again, similar to Mexico and Canada, the UK already have a trade agreement with South Korea. However, there is a joint interest and commitment to begin talks later this year on enhancing that trade agreement. So that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, I suppose, of different national targets. So using the language we talked about earlier, these are all bilateral agreements, bilateral targets. Now, let's quickly mention two potential multilateral agreements which are of interest to the UK. Firstly, and arguably the less publicised trade target, is the Gulf Cooperation Council. Now, founded in 1981, currently has 6 signatures: Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Currently, these countries account for 1.9% of the global GDP, but as these countries start to move away from their dependency on oil, there is an opportunity there for the UK to strengthen their trade ties, and DIT have confirmed that they are looking to target membership of the GCC. Finally, and possibly the most well publicised goal since leaving the EU, is our application to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. This Asia-Pacific trade bloc includes Canada, Mexico, Peru, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Brunei, Vietnam, Malaysia and Japan. Currently, this trade bloc accounts for 13% of the global GDP, and their share of the global imports is forecasted to rise to $13.3 trillion by 2050. Like I said, joining this trade bloc is a well publicised aim of the UK government, and I think it's no secret the reasons we prioritise trade agreements with Japan, Australia and New Zealand, plus the renegotiations with Mexico and Canada, is to access their support in our application to join the CPTPP, and that application is now underway. So I hope that what I've shown you there is just how busy 2022 and 23 is going to be for the UK and DIT. The possibilities for importers and exporters of every sector is going to continue to grow and develop, with the possibility to reach and trade with countries with different economic and cultural backgrounds. Away from FTAs and target markets and negotiations, we're also seeing changes to the generalised scheme of preference. Now outside the EU, we are looking at developing our own system, which is currently being referred to as the Developing Countries Trading Scheme. Now, the idea is that this scheme would apply to the 70 qualifying countries which currently benefit from the GSP. However, we'll see a simpler and more generous UK system by simplifying the rules of origin requirements and generally trying to cut down on bureaucracy. So I think for my part that pretty much sums it up. To conclude, the last 16 months or so have been difficult for businesses. Regardless of COVID, the effects of Brexit have rippled across all sectors and supply chains. Hopefully, businesses are now starting to stabilise as we, touch wood, start to come out of the pandemic and businesses start to understand the UK-EU TCA and how that works in practice. Maybe now is a good time for businesses to start looking at these new global opportunities. Ask yourself the question, can you possibly source from a better supplier? Maybe you've always known of a high quality supplier for your product, but a new trade agreement has now made trading with that supplier financially available. It's opened that door to you. Or is there a new market which you can access? Demands of consumers and businesses vary so widely across the globe. Maybe you can now access a new market which you potentially wouldn't have even considered while we were in the EU. All I would say is make the most of the support which is available. You've got your 2 local growth hubs and we'll put their details up again throughout the Q&A. On top of the growth hubs, you've got the Department for International Trade, DIT. Now on their website you've got various pieces of support available, but for example you could sign up to their Export Academy and potentially access an international trade advisor. Please don't be afraid to ask for help and make the most of the support services which are available to you. Now I think that covers everything I have to say, so thank you very much everyone for listening. What I'll do is I'll pass back to Tracy and we can run through the Q&A. Back to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Ben. If you need any more information or support, the contact details for both local growth hubs are showing on the screen now.